The Obama administration has played loose with the rule of law since this president's first day in office. Sadly, he and his principal advisors seem to me to come from a generation that sincerely believes that the ends in almost all circumstances justify the means. Thus, they enforce laws that further their goals. They ignore those that do not. They interpret the laws and the Constitution itself in light of what they wanted them to say rather than either the intent of Congress or the words of the founders. And when anyone, including the Supreme Court itself, disagrees, they go on the attack. But it goes far beyond gun questions. Consider their current assault on the various states' attempts to protect the integrity of the democratic process itself. I think we'll have some discussion of what's going on in Florida right now, where the Justice Department, without any basis that most experts can see, are trying to stop the state of Florida from purging non-citizens and the dead and others from their voting rolls prior to the next elections on the ground that it's unfair, I guess, to the dead and the non-eligible voters. Consider the president's personal disdain for the democratic process. While spending more than any of his predecessors on fundraising and bragging that he's going to have $1 billion in the upcoming campaign to bury his opponents, he publicly attacks his opponents because they spend money to get their message out to the public. Consider his only partially whimsical remark that sometimes he wishes he could govern America the way China's rulers governed China, so that he wouldn't have to deal with such things as separation of power and the Congress and the courts. It seems to me that sometimes in whimsical remarks one gets at the truth, and that we are facing a time in this country when the rule of law is really in question. You know, it's been said that the mark of a tyranny is to make everything illegal and then let your friends off the hook. And I'm often inspired when Franklin Roosevelt appointed Robert Jackson to be the Attorney General of the United States. This was back a long time ago. He brought his deputies at the Justice Department together and said, you know, we have the power in our hands to send any citizen of this country to jail if we want to. And gentlemen, that's not our job. But a government that has that power and is willing to use it, is willing to enforce laws selectively and let its friends off the hook, is a government that does not have great respect for the rule of law itself, and that is in essence going to do great damage to the rule of law and to the civil society in which we live if it's allowed to continue with that. I was talking just before this panel with Rand Paul of Kentucky, and I just purchased a book on the threat to individual rights in the modern society, and it shows the old way of thinking, because there's a chapter on every one of the first 10 amendments except for the Second Amendment. And too many establishment folks for too long ignored that particular amendment, and now they can't anymore. And of course, the government's picking of favorites doesn't just take place on Second Amendment questions. Maureen must have been a little taken aback when the government went after some oil companies because they said that 2 ducks died, only to see a few weeks later the attempt by the government to publish rules which would allow people that produce wind power to be exempt from the laws that make it illegal to kill bald eagles. So that if you produce wind power, you can allow your machinery to eat up endangered species or threatened species or national symbols. But if you're an evil oil company, you better be careful that a bird doesn't get sick anywhere within your area. More importantly, I think, is in some ways is the cavalier way in which the elections are regarded, the almost overt attempts to jigger things so that they come out right, and if they don't come out right, to use the law to get things fixed so that next time they'll come out right. because just as the Supreme Court's ultimate authority lies in the opinions of the people, so too does the stability of a democracy rely on winners and losers accepting the outcome of democratic decision-making. And if that is undermined, that's more serious almost than anything. So in many ways, what the administration has done in this area, and does overtly and openly, I suspect is as damaging or more damaging to the future stability of the country than almost anything else that goes on. I'm sure that just as Maureen was taken aback by some of the regulations that are being considered in the environmental area, he must have been taken aback during the current, or the hopefully just ended controversies in Wisconsin with the way prosecutors' offices investigating the incumbent governor have teams of investigators, all of whom had signed recall petitions, and many of whom had contributed to his opponent, and have those cases referred and much referred to judges who had also signed recall petitions and were then asked to decide on questions involving the governor, who they wanted to almost extra-legally throw out of office. We probably should have begun at the beginning of this by celebrating what happened in Wisconsin. You know, Scott Walker there were a lot of reasons to return Scott Walker to office. When he was in the legislature, and remember, I think he was the first Republican ever elected countywide in Milwaukee County to anything.
It's kind of like Netanyahu being elected the mayor of Cairo.
Right, but when he was in the legislature, he was the prime sponsor of concealed carry for Wisconsin, and as you'll recall, there were only 2 states that didn't in one form or another have a concealed carry law. They were Illinois and Wisconsin. As soon as he got through his budget fight in the legislature this year, he got that bill passed and signed into law, so that there's only 1 state without any form of concealed carry, and we're in that state right now. Scott told me that when he ran for county executive years ago in Milwaukee County, that the opposition had these posters of a gun pointing at you, and he said it was really a pretty good deal because they paid for the posters and he got the votes.